Hey, what's up? Bill Bogenreef here for NorCal EMS, introducing this live webcast for continuing education titled Region 3 Mass Casualty Incident Field Operations. This webcast will be presented in two parts. The first part is the overview of the Office of Emergency Services Mass Casualty Incident Plan, Manual 1. The second part of this series is the overview of the Office of Emergency Services Mass Casualty Incident Plan, Manual 2, Patient Distribution. Participants should have copies of the Mass Casualty Incident Plan Manuals 1 and 2 for this webcast series. This webcast will be presented by Dr. Eric Rudnick, Medical Director for NorCal EMS, and Mark Belden, Paramedic and Operations Manager of American Medical Response. So without further ado, let's join Mark Belden live as he presents Mass Casualty Incident Field Operations, followed with comments by Dr. Eric Rudnick.
Thank you all for being here. This is the NorCal EMS Multi-Casualty Incident Field Operations presentation. This is an overview of the OES Region 3 MCI plan that was created last year during the HPP cycle in agreement with SSV EMS as well as NorCal. Again, this covers the 13 Region 3 counties. It was kind of interesting putting this plan together to make it work for 13 counties, as well as some of the counties from OES Region 4. You should have a copy of the Region 3 MCI plan with you. If not, it is available on the NorCal EMS website. And this presentation follows almost page by page the MCI plan. The first slide there is a screenshot of the LAX shooting that occurred this last summer. In November of this last year. Some key points I just want to point out here is the vehicle placement and the tarp placement. Usually, especially in the train-the-trainer part, is what do you think of this scene? Some things to be concerned with vehicle placement is the noise level that's going to be going on here, as well as the exhaust fumes. And the exhaust fumes was something that came out in their after-action report of this incident. The other thing is the tarp placement. The immediate and the delayed, the red and the yellow tarps are in a good position there. However, the green or the minor treatment area should be farther away. You really don't want to have those people that have the minor injuries staring at the people that have definitely the more traumatic type of injuries. Also, in looking at the personnel that you can see at scene, we don't see any position vests. Now, this is one agency, and most likely they know who their chief officers are and who's responsible for what position, so that works for them. But in a multi-agency response, which we would typically occur here in Region 3, you really do need to vest up those people that are in charge of their positions, whether it be the incident commander, the ops section chief, medical group supervisor. Those folks should be vested and clearly identified. Some of the assumptions with this plan, that all field responders should be trained to a minimum of the ICS 100 level, so they have a basic understanding of the incident command level. And we also strongly encourage ICS 200, which provides a stronger foundation of ICS. You should also have a knowledge of the Fire Scope Field Operations FOG manual, which does contain an MCI section, which is typically blue if you have the pre-printed mass available book. The purpose of this plan, I don't really need to read the slide, but it is to establish a minimum standard for OES Region 3. Operational areas play an important role in this successful implementation of this plan. There is room in this plan for operational areas to include their own components of an MCI response. Again, this is just really a broad overview to give a standard for each operational area. Contents in this plan, as you can see here, we cover command and control, communications, equipment, activation of an MCI alert, and we talk about the new control facility concept for Region 3, incident operations, resource and ancillary operations, Position checklists, which are very important. Again, we don't do a lot of MCIs in Region 3, so having these position checklists is very important for folks to do a quick read on what their responsibility is. There's also some guidelines in here for medical branch development, start triage. A sample triage kit, which I'll get into later, is very important to successful operation during an MCI. We'll review some of the forms, and also there's a glossary at the end. If at any time for those folks on the phone, if you have any questions about a term that I'm using, please just let me know. And again, it really kind of starts off with a command and control overview, and this is ICS 100. The incident commander has overall responsibility for incident response and management. They are at the scene representing the public service agency, having primary investigative authority or responsibility. And again, in each operational area, this may be a little bit different depending on your relationship with CHP, the Sheriff's Department, or a city police department. Typically, law enforcement will have jurisdictional authority over roadways, especially CHP for highways, freeways, and unincorporated roads of a county. But again, that's up to the operational area, and that's the nice part about this plan, is it doesn't specifically address that. That's more up for the operational areas. The IC is also responsible for coordination of all public and private agencies engaged in the incident site, establish the incident command post, and establishes the type of command that's going to be utilized, whether it's going to be a single or a unified command. And when you start dealing with multiple agencies, especially if you're involving law enforcement, you want to consider going to that unified command very quickly. Communications, the #1 fail in most MCIs and most incidents where you have that large structure going on. Communications usually becomes an issue. If your operational area has a communications plan, know it and exercise it. Go through it, review it, make sure that those frequencies are still, if they're repeated or toned, that they're still working appropriately. You have your normal communications, which we use day to day. But one thing with an MCI, you have to remember that these are not day-to-day operations. So if you do have a communications plan, you really do need to exercise it, know what a tactical frequency is, know what a command net is, and I'll get into that here in just a little bit more. When you're at a scene of an incident, make sure that you're using English or clear text. I know this can be problematic with law enforcement 10 codes, but if they're involved in the unified command, they really do need to speak clearly and not use those 10 codes that they're so familiar with. All communication should be confirmed, and only essential messages should be going out. Try and keep the chatter down because there's a lot of stuff going on during these. The command net is for the incident commander and key staff to communicate, along with the section chiefs, division chiefs, and group supervisors. We may also establish a command net to talk to a control facility, and I'll get into that later on in the presentation. There may be several TAC nets, and these are typically what are called car-to-car or line-of-sight frequencies, and that may serve several agencies, groups, divisions, or geographic areas. If your incident is separated north and south, that's a good way between those two divisions to talk to each other. Or also maybe even multiple fire units or multiple EMS units to communicate just on site. Equipment and supplies, having the right tools for the job is imperative. If you don't have the right tools in place, it's going to be very hard to succeed. The initial scene organization, having those triage tags available in the first response is very important. Again, which triage tag you use is up to the individual operational areas, but ST.A.R.T triage is our standard. Triage kit, and Appendix D has the contents of that triage kit. It contains a couple of vests to get started so people are easily identified, triage tags, and some other items like light sticks in case you're operating at night, pens, pencils, flagging tape. All remaining vests, when you get into that, should be carried on some type of command vehicle. They don't need to be carried in each response unit. Typically you see that in a battalion chief's or an EMS supervisor, or even a captain's vehicle if it's a law enforcement. Activation notification. Throughout Region 3, we have the control facility piece up and running now. And NorCal does have memorandums of understanding with both Mercy Medical Center Redding and Inlow Medical Center in Chico for the control to handle the control facility piece for the NorCal counties. Early notification is imperative. So when you suspect that you may be responding on, or you suspect you may have a multi-casualty incident, notification to your dispatch center or directly to either Shasta Control or Butte Control that you may have an MCI alert is imperative. And I'll get into that a little bit more, why that's so important. Mobilization of resources. Three main categories, and we all know that if our typical response should be go big, because if we don't need them, they can go home. And I think the fire side gets that very well. We see that throughout the summers with the large fires. If the dispatch level is high, there's multiple fire engines and resources responding. We don't do such a good job on that on the EMS side. We may send one ambulance to a bus crash. We should be sending multiple units, and you should recognize that early. Those resources can always be turned around if you don't need them. Make sure you have the appropriate manpower, whether it's ALS. I think most of the ambulances in the area are ALS. And then also consider other resources besides ground ambulances, like air ambulances, buses, mass transit. If you think your incident is large enough, consider requesting an ambulance strike team. So notification of the control facility. And the two primary control facilities in Region 3 are Butte Control in Chico and Shasta Control in Redding. Notification of them should be done en route. Once the control facility receives notification, they put out an electronic notification to the other facilities in the area to request their bed availability. The nice part about that is we no longer have to do that in the field, and that's what we used to have to do previously, and that took up a lot of our time and resources. So that goes to the control facility. When you arrive at scene, you either confirm that you have an MCI or you can cancel the alert. When you do your size up, again, just like on the fire side, when they size up the scene, you need to notify what kind of MCI you have, whether it's a medical, a trauma, or a hazmat. That's very important, especially in the hazmat if decontamination is going to be necessary. Frequent updates to the control facility is imperative. We need to know that how many patients that you have, as those classifications, whether immediates, delayed, or minors, as those change, they need to be updated so that they can find the appropriate facilities for those patients to go to. Once ICS has been initiated, report to the incident commander or their designee and get permission to establish a medical group. And the IC may just assign somebody right off the bat to the medical group. Again, the earlier that's done, the more successful your operation can be. We like the following acronym for gathering information when you arrive at scene. It's called the racing algorithm. So when you arrive and you need to get information, you should be asking about resources, who's there and who's coming. Assignments. Everybody on an incident command incident, or an incident that's being led by incident command system, should have a job. Everybody reports to somebody and somebody reports to somebody else. So there's always a job to be had. What are the lines of communications? If you have a pre-planned disaster or incident communications plan, make sure everybody is aware of that and everybody can communicate on those channels. If you don't, make sure that your assignments to everybody are clear on what frequencies to use, and if you have tone capabilities, that everybody is on the correct tone. The ingress and egress of the incident, typically you don't want those to be the same. And once you establish that proper ingress and proper egress, make sure the dispatch is aware so that they can advise incoming units. The purpose of this is to prevent clogging of the scene and also to keep the noise level down. You don't want all your resources right there at scene at the same time due to the noise level and exhaust. What is the name of the incident? Most dispatch centers name the incident prior to unit's arrival, which is great. If not, the name of the incident should be kept simple, and just be mindful of your street names before you assign an incident. If you're on Hooker Creek Road or Paul's Ferry Road, just be careful on how you decide the name of your incident, because you're going to live with it. Geography, where the staging areas are, where the triage areas are set up, and treatment areas as well. And again, make sure if it's a hazmat incident, you're upwind and uphill from those incidents. EMS field management, it's imperative that folks are identified. When you arrive at scene and you have to run around to try and figure out who's in charge, it just takes more time and confuses everyone. So if you can get the vests out there quickly, if you can carry them on your response vehicles in the triage kits, that is excellent. To have a triage and a communications or a medical group supervisor vest. Make sure that the appropriate position checklists are with those vests, and when you assign them, you can take the position checklists that are in the MCI plan and cut them up and laminate them and put them in the vests, or put them in your MCI checklist as well, so you can just hand those checklists out. And again, imperative, make sure that the mode of communication is being utilized. This is just one example of how things look. This person is the treatment area manager or the immediate treatment area manager. They're identified with a vest. Another thing that I like here is that portfolio that he's carrying has all the information for his job in it. So it has a clipboard, it has the position checklist for the immediate treatment area, pens, pencils, and notepads so they can take notes. This slide is a little big, and I apologize for that, but it just really goes over racing again, just to make sure that you're asking the appropriate questions. The medical group supervisor should be the first qualified responder in the position in accordance with local policy, maybe law enforcement or fire departments or even private ambulance personnel. Kind of going a little bit deeper into the racing algorithm, resources, equipment and medical supplies. If you have medical caches, backboards and litters, have a spot to put all those. Remember that your first in ambulance should be the last one to leave. So if you use that philosophy, think of that first in ambulance being put up on blocks, the wheels being pulled off, and all the equipment being dumped out of it. That's really the philosophy that you should have. That should be your go-to place for supplies. As additional units come in, you can have them drop off spine boards, BLS supplies or ALS supplies, depending on how long this event is going to be going on. And do you have enough manpower? Do you have enough first responders, EMTs, paramedics? Can you reassign fire personnel after suppression has been completed or extrication has been completed? Can you reassign those resources into the treatment area as litter bearers or even caregivers? Transportation, again, I mentioned earlier, consider air resources as appropriate, additional ground resources, whether it be in the form of single resource requests or an ambulance strike team, and consider vans or buses. And you can use school buses, transit buses, whatever you can get to move. They're really good to move all those minor patients off your scene. Assignments, again, establishment of the medical group and assigned personnel. Direct or supervise those personnel from agencies such as the coroner's office, Red Cross, ambulances, etc. That's going to be for probably a longer, more entailed MCI. Communications, really, I can't stress it enough. Make sure your communications plan is in place and that everybody knows what frequencies they should be on. Ingress and egress, I talked about that. Consider having a staging area for incoming ambulances and other resources, and then call them up to the treatment areas as needed. This will help reduce the noise level and also confusion about what positions folks have. Ensure that you've notified the control facility and that you have an established communication with them, whether it be over the radio, over the phone, however you can communicate with them. Just make sure you have a stable source of communications. The name, I talked about that. When you are communicating with the control facility, you want to use the incident name and then medical. So if you were on a freeway incident, you would be freeway medical talking with the control facility. So it'd be, for example, Butte Control Freeway Medical, and that would be how you'd want to talk to them. Talked about designating the treatment area locations, isolate the morgue. We really don't get heavy into the morgue, and really we shouldn't. We should only be moving deceased patients to get to the alive patients that we can save. Most MCIs are going to be a crime scene until proven otherwise, so we want to leave those folks in place so that law enforcement can start their investigation along with the coroner's office. Request proper security, traffic control and access to the work areas. If you're dealing with a mass incident at a school, security is going to be paramount on making sure that the parents or kept away from the treatment areas as best possible, it's going to be difficult to control. So you need to know that that's going to be really going to be a challenge right off the bat. This is kind of the first slide that we talk about the 214 form. Very important with any type of incident that you maintain that 214 form, which is a basic log of things that have gone on that you've been instructed to do during the course of that. Examples would be arrived at scene along with the time, obtained a briefing from your supervisor, established the whatever branch you may be responsible for, transported this number of patients, very brief descriptions of what was done along with the time, and then those get turned into your the person that you're reporting to at the end of the incident, or as soon as possible. For incident operations and incident command, we should know our common responsibilities, and that is it's standard throughout the FOG manual for the fire scope. For EMS, the triage unit leader, we do recommend BLS folks do triage. Paramedics have a tendency to get a little bit sideways on some of the treatment that needs to be done. When there's only 2 types of treatment that needs to be done, BLS responders recognize that, do it well. Paramedics are great for starting the immediate treatment area, so as soon as these folks have been triaged, they can be put, the most critical ones can be put in the immediate treatment area, get that immediate treatment, and get shipped out. The nice thing about the triage unit is once triage is done, that unit can be disbanded, and those folks can be reassigned later on. The treatment unit leader is responsible for all 3 treatment areas, the minor, the delayed, and the immediate treatment areas. But their function is really kind of dependent on the size and scope of the incident. You may not need to have all 3 treatment areas opened up, depending on the size of your incident. You may only need to have 1 or 2. The patient transportation group supervisor, this is the toughest position in the medical branch. This person needs to be intimately familiar with your operational area procedures for EMS, radio frequencies, control facility functions, because they're the ones that are going to be taking the information from the scene, relaying it to the control facility, and then bringing the information back from the control facility to the scene to disperse the patients. Again, this is a very tough position. You may share this as a medical group supervisor. This may be also part of your responsibility, again, depending on the scope and nature of your incident. The larger the incident, the more chance, the bigger chance that you're going to need a patient transportation group supervisor. Designated areas. Sorry, I'm caught up on my notes here. Set up your treatment areas for success. Again, I had mentioned earlier that when you're setting up your tarps, and again, identification is key. We showed tarps earlier. It can be anything from tarps to flags to cones to flagging. However it best works for you to set up your treatment areas, you just need to do it. Instead of saying over there by that tree, you should have something red wrapped around that tree for an immediate treatment area. Just remember, treatment areas should be a safe distance from hazards, upwind from toxic fumes, vehicle exhaust, allow for vehicle access. Minor patient areas should be separated from the immediate and the delayed. Again, you just don't want to traumatize those folks that have been involved in the incident by having them in close proximity to people who have obtained more severe injuries in that incident. The goal in the treatment areas is to get the red out, so we want to make sure that those immediate patients are getting off scene first. But also be mindful that your resources are going to be limited, so if you are putting an immediate patient in an ambulance, you should be able to stick in a delayed as well as a minor or a couple of minors to get those folks off the scene as well. But you do want to concentrate on getting the red out first. Here's an example of some treatment area flagging. The first one are just the rolls of flagging tape. They don't have to say first, second, or third, but they should be colored appropriately: red, yellow, green, and blue or black. In this case would be the morgue. There's also a description, or shows you some flags there, and then also the tarps. You just have to be mindful of your incident because each one is going to be a little bit different. Using the tarps, if it's windy, could be problematic unless you can hold it down with boards or you have something else, or hose packs to hold the tarp down. The flags work good. Again, if they're windy and they're upwind or downwind, you might have trouble seeing the flag depending on how it's waving. Cones work really well. And tape, the flagging tape works pretty well because even if it's flapping in the wind, chances are you can see it pretty well. EMS Staging Area is a collection point for EMS personnel and equipment. Consider one-way traffic flow. Again, this is to prevent a bottleneck on your scene. And it may be shared with law enforcement or fire on a larger incident. Your loading area should be close to the immediate treatment area so that the patients don't have to be carried as far. But you should definitely consider vehicle exhaust. I know on most of the Type 2 van-style ambulances, the exhaust comes out on the right side of the vehicle. So you want to may consider having them pull up where the incident or the treatment areas are on the left side of their vehicle. You may also ask them to shut their vehicle down. I know that's an uncomfortable thing for us to shut our vehicles down in an incident, but you really should consider it for not only the patient's safety, but for your own safety, because you don't want to be, if you're going to be in that area for a long period of time, you don't want to be breathing the vehicle exhaust. The morgue area, I had mentioned earlier that most MCIs are considered a crime scene. We should not be moving the deceased again unless we have to get to a live person to save somebody that's salvageable. Definitely, if you do have to establish a morgue area and move patients into that, you want to have that as far away from your treatment area as possible. Again, you just don't want folks looking at that, or even you don't want them looking at the covered the sheets on the boards or on the bodies. You may want to consider, if you've left your morgue patients at the incident site and you now have your treatment areas established, if somebody does expire in a treatment area, you may want to consider having a secondary morgue area to put those folks that have expired in there to keep them away from everybody else. For the triage area, victims are usually triaged where they lie, and then there's only two things that we only two types of treatment that we do during triage, and that is opening the airway and hemorrhage control. That's where it's a good idea, and I know there's some discussion going around for active shooter mass violence types of incidents to carry for your triage officers, or even in your triage kit, carrying tourniquets so you can rapidly place a tourniquet, tag that person, and move on to the next. You may also need to, you may be in an instance, whether it's a hazmat, a structure fire, something like that, where you have to rescue your victims. Rescue is simply that. You're not doing any treatment. You are establishing the fact that that person is salvageable, and you're immediately extricating them from that scene to a triage area where they can be properly triaged and then moved to a treatment area. Don't worry about C-spine. Don't worry about managing an airway. If they're breathing and they have a pulse, just extricate them from that area and get them to a triage site. This is an example of a scene setup. There's a couple things to think about here. They do have a police control line, which is great. I wish we had the resources like that on every incident. There's an ambulance staging area and a patient loading area. The one thing, if you look at this, and it's those Type 2 ambulances, the van style with the exhaust coming out on the right side, the exhaust is going right on the patient loading area. So again, that's something to consider when you're loading up your patients. It would be difficult either way, I think, to set this scene up without that happening, but you can ask folks to shut off their vehicles. If you are dealing with some type of explosive incident, like it shows here, be mindful of sequential, not secondary devices, but sequential devices, because if somebody is truly in the mode of causing mass carnage, they're not going to stop at one, probably won't stop at two, so you have to have that scene safety vigilance going on at all times, that they may be looking at those sequential type events to happen. I do like the minor treatment area. It is set away from the immediate and the delayed areas. The immediate and delayed are close together and have appropriate resources. So again, just an idea of how to set up a scene. Okay, triage. One important thing to remember with triage is 32 can do. And that is really the moniker for start triage, and how we make this a quick and effective process. And that is what it's all about, is doing a down and dirty, quick patient assessment based on their respiratory rate, their pulse, and their mentation. Start triage is broken up into 4 categories: the immediate or the most critical, life-threatening, and need to get to a definitive treatment center as soon as possible. And then you have your delayed, which are all those serious. They may have life-threatening injuries. They don't need to get to a definitive care as quickly. The minor are the walking wounded, non-life-threatening or limb-threatening injuries. And then obviously the deceased or non-salvageable are the more mortally wounded. This is the one of the most recent versions of the ST.A.R.T triage tag. Again, triage tags are operational area dependent. You don't have to use this particular tag, but just remember that no matter what you get, you may get somebody, if you're requesting resources from another operational area or county, they may not be familiar with your system. So you may have to do a very quick down and dirty education to those folks. I know the colors are simple, and if the triage is done before those other resources get there, it should not be an issue. If you look on the right side of the tag on the screen there, it does give you a reminder of ST.A.R.T triage and what to and how to go through that 32 can-do process. Back up here real quick if I can. There we go. So for 32 can do, and I hope I'm not getting ahead of myself as I usually do when I'm doing these presentations. Let me just make sure. Okay, so 32 can do. The first thing you want to do is, does the patient have a respiratory rate greater than 30? If they do, you tag them immediate or red and move on. If they do not have a respiratory rate greater than 30, then you look and see if they have capillary refill less than 2 seconds, or a radial pulse. I know it's kind of hard to see a capillary refill at night, or if it's real cold out, it may be delayed anyways, but you can also use a radial pulse. If they have a radial pulse or capillary refill less than 2 seconds, then you would want to check their mentation. If their capillary refill is greater than 2 seconds, or they do not have a radial pulse, you tag them immediate and move on. If you get down to their mentation, just ask them simple questions. You don't have to ask them who the president is, or those types of more in-depth questions that we do with a normal patient. Just ask them if they know their name, can they touch their finger to their nose. If they cannot do those, you tag them immediate and move on. Again, the only 2 treatments that we're going to do during triage is to open the airway and also to control major hemorrhage. All patients, once they've all been triaged, you can start transport of the immediate patients, and you may transport an immediate patient directly from the triage area to a unit if the incident is progressed to that level. If there's going to be a delay in transport due to lack of transport resources, then get those treatment areas established. Resource management should be handled, or additional resources should be handled in the proper ICS chain, and that goes up chain through either your operations section chief, who it depends, or it may be the IC, depending on how big the incident is and who they've designated to handle those resource requests. Make sure that when you're requesting resources, you should have them go to staging first if that's been established. Make sure those resources know what their jobs are when they arrive at scene. There's that one-way traffic control again. When folks are in staging, they should remain with their vehicles, and keys should remain in the vehicles at all times in case they're not with their vehicle and the vehicle has to be moved. Also start, if you're to this level of an incident where you've got multiple units coming in, you really do need to start considering a medical equipment cache. Transportation and patient dispersal. And again, a big slide there. This is where the control facility comes in and helps tremendously. It takes a tremendous load off of the responders at scene, knowing that somebody else is handling the destination of your patients. When you are ready to load, make sure that you're maximized without jeopardizing patient care. I'd mentioned earlier, if you are transporting an immediate patient, there should be room for some minors in there as well, or a delayed if the responder in the back of the ambulance can handle that. There are times where you may have 2 immediate patients. If the responder feels comfortable and has the resources to take care of that, they can. Really, it's going to be up to them. In the larger MCIs, again, consider those alternate transport methods, whether they be helicopters or buses. Just remember, if you do use a non-EMS or type of bus or resource, that you will have to have a minimum of a first responder or an EMT on board that bus with a gear bag, and preferably an AED in case one of the minor patients changes. Something else to consider, using that bus to go to multiple facilities. And the way you can do that is break them up and put everybody that's going to one hospital on the right side of the bus and people going to another hospital on the left side of the bus, or putting people front to back so they can get off the bus easily. But you should consider that if you're going to multiple facilities. Make sure that before patients leave the scene that they've gone through the patient transportation group supervisor so that those folks are tracked. We have that triage tag number and hopefully a name before they depart the scene, and at a minimum their age, gender, and type of injury, whether it's a head, a chest, an arm, something like that. It doesn't need to be a big detailed patient care report basically. All the movement of patients should be tracked on the patient transportation summary worksheet, which is at the end of this document, and we'll review that when we get down to there. Contamination. Be mindful, there's a lot of things going up and down our freeways and rail lines that for the majority of the time they go up and down without an incident, but every once in a while something happens and it becomes a hazardous materials incident. So you should be looking out for that at all times, and whether or not any toxins or hazards are present at the scene. Remember that if you feel that it may be an organophosphate type of poisoning, or if you're involved in some type of potential nerve gas, there is the regional chem pack that is available, and you can request that through your dispatch center. It's important to note that when you do request a chem pack, if you know the type of chemical, that's great. You definitely need to know the types of patients, and also adult or pediatric, because they have different dosing for both adult and pediatrics. Standing orders. During an MCI, it's imperative that radio transmissions be kept to a minimum. Therefore, when ambulances are transporting folks to the hospital, they should not be given a report to the receiving facility. That's being done between the patient transportation group supervisor, the control facility, and the receiving facility. The folks in the back of the ambulance have a lot to do. They've got very critical patients, or they have multiple patients that they have to take care of. So taking the time out to give a radio report is not practical. I know that is a stark departure from our normal day-to-day activities, but that is something that does need to be practiced during these incidents. If you get into a position as a caregiver in the back of the ambulance where you need that base consultation, you can do that. Just make sure that it is kept to a minimum. We just want to make sure that radio traffic is kept down as much as possible. Okay, ancillary and resources and ancillary operations. We have the day-to-day mutual aid, which may include your neighboring responders coming to help you out, and that's the stuff we kind of expect to happen. Master mutual aid, that's when you get to those larger incidents where you're requesting an ambulance strike team, resources from well outside your normal operational area to come in and help. Some of the ancillary operations that we would use during an MCI, dispatch centers, through making our resource requests, the control facilities, receiving facilities, and that'll be receiving facilities outside of your normal operational area transport. The local emergency medical services agencies, whether it be NorCal EMS or SSV, the local office of emergency services, military establishments if they're close by. The larger incidents may involve Red Cross and ham operators to assist with communications. So documentation. You are still required to do PCRs on all patients, but for starting off, try and get as much information on those triage tags as possible. Now obviously you're not going to do that during the triage phase, but if these patients are sitting in their treatment areas, whether it's the immediate, delayed, or the minor areas, that's an opportunity to get some documentation started, at a minimum a name, and then if you can get any other type of history or description of injuries, you can make those notes on the triage cards. The other thing you need to know, when you're using those triage cards, if they're wet, you're pretty much not going to be able to write on them. So however you can make those notes transition with the patient is beneficial. Some other forms to consider. Pre-hospital care records, again, for every patient transported, you do need to do your normal PCR that you do for your agency. The medical branch worksheet, which is a great tool for just knowing who's in charge of what position, and also if those change. The patient transportation summary worksheet is the most important one because that tracks those patients from triage through transportation to the receiving facility. Ambulance staging resource status form is in case your incident goes larger and you're using the staging area and those resources. Supply receipt and inventory form, and that's going to again be if your incident is larger and you need to start pulling items off of ambulances. You need to fill out those forms so you can make sure that those items get back to that specific ambulance or ambulance company. Copies of all forms should be forwarded to the LEMSA within 48 hours of the incident, and an agency critique will be performed. We really do need to critique every MCI that we go on. The reason being is there's going to be, I've yet to see an MCI go perfectly. I've seen some go really good and I've seen some go really bad. And having that critique helps us to improve so that each and every time that we do one of these, mainly because they don't happen, thankfully, all that often, we get a little bit better at it. So for the appendices towards the back of the MCI plan, the position checklist, and again, this is typical for fire scope, is to review the common responsibilities. And there are common responsibilities for each and every job, and there's a global, at the beginning of the field operations guide, there is a global common responsibilities. And then just give a brief review of those typical positions we would see at an MCI, starting off with the medical group supervisor, the triage unit leader. Those two are going to be the first two positions started up. The medical group supervisor is going to have multiple hats. One of them right off the bat is being communications and requesting those additional resources. And then if the treatment unit leader, and then as the incident grows, the patient transportation group supervisor. If you have an extremely large incident where you're going to have patients sitting at scene for a while and these folks are going to be going over large distances, you really do need to consider making this a branch in the ICS structure. And we do recommend that anytime you're doing an MCI training that you do activate the branch. What activating a branch in a drill does is gives more people, more responders the opportunity to play in these different positions so that when they do actually respond to a real incident, they're more familiar with those types of positions. The next one is a slide of some of the forms that are on there for response organization. The first one is the typical one. You'll see this in almost any fire EMS response where you have the incident commander, the medical group supervisor, and the triage unit leader. That's going to be the first two positions that are established. And you see immediate treatment manager, and that's for the folks that are need that immediate care to get off the scene. And then the next one to the right there is a multi-casual reinforced response. There's a few more positions activated there. And then you have a multi-group response organization, and that's for the larger long-term type of MCIs. Start triage. I had mentioned the 32 can do. This is a very quick algorithm for that. Again, you want to identify, once you identify a patient as being immediate, you move on to the next one. You don't, if somebody does have a respiratory rate over 30, you don't really need to reposition their, obviously you don't need to reposition their airway, but you don't need to check for perfusion or mentation. They're an immediate and you move on. They'll be re-triaged when they get to their appropriate treatment area. I failed to mention this earlier, but one of the first things that you can do, the first in-unit can do when arriving at scene, if you have a PA or some type of public address system, is ask those folks that can get up and walk to get up and walk to a location that you define. You have just taken all of your minor patients and moved them to one area. So the folks that you're triaging are going to be either dead non-salvageable, immediate, or delayed. And then make sure that once the appropriate resources arrive at scene, that you assign a first responder or an EMT to that minor treatment area to handle those folks and start putting the tags on them and address any treatment that those folks may need. Again, I talked about the perfusion, either 2 seconds on the capillary refill or a radial pulse present, and then the mentation status. It's just simple commands whether or not they can follow those or not. The sample triage kit, this is really, to me, one of the bigger things and more of the important things in this plan, because this helps you set up for a successful incident. Because you're immediately identifying those people in the key positions of triage and medical group supervisor. The other position, and then the other vests can be carried in those command vehicles, as I had mentioned earlier. But you should have the position checklist for the medical group supervisor, the communications coordinator, and those other positions listed there. You should have the minimum quantity of S.T.A.R.T triage tags for your LEMSA, whatever your operational area or your LEMSA decides that you should have. But it's usually around 30. That's a good place to start. 2 grease pencils and ballpoint pens. The grease pencils seem to write better on the triage tags. Again, once they're wet, it's hard to write on them with anything. The trauma shears are good in case you need to cut something to put on a tourniquet or something along that line. Clipboards, really good. The S.T.A.R.T triage reference sheet, that was one of the earlier attachments there. The glow sticks, barrier tape. It doesn't have to be the red, the yellow, the green, or blue or black tape. Having some type of barrier tape in there so you can throw it up real quick. It's amazing what that can slow down either the public or whoever else may be trying to get into your area. Just having some type of barrier tape. The glow sticks are great for those nighttime operations. Something to carry it in. You can use zippered folio bags. A 3-inch binder type of zippered folio works really well for all this. Your control facility communications plan or your comm plan, and then at least 2 each of those forms that are listed there, specifically the patient transportation worksheet, summary worksheet. This is also a great thing to talk to your HPP group about, of ordering these surge supplies for all of your response vehicles. And when I say all response vehicles, that's ambulances, squads, fire trucks, and police cars if we can get them on there. Here's the next one on Appendix D is the copy of the multi-casualty branch worksheet. And again, depending on your incident, you may not fill out every box in here, but you should have a medical group supervisor and a treatment unit leader. If that's all that's on there, that's fine. But if your incident does grow larger, you do need to fill in those positions. And again, this is a great resource for the medical group supervisor or even branch director if it goes that far to have. The next one is a sample of the patient transportation summary worksheet. Kind of starting at we'll start at the top there, the incident name. This is the main incident, and then the date and time that it was prepared. Going across from left to right, is the patient ready for transport? There's triage status, immediate, delayed, or minor, excuse me. The type of injury, and you can see there it's just one simple word: chest, abdomen, head, leg fracture, arm fracture, head lack. The mode of transport, whether it's going to be ground or air or bus. The destination of hospital, you don't need to write out the whole long name. If you know their abbreviation and you know what that means, that's fine. How the patients were transported from the scene, the ambulance company, and the radio ID. So we have, as an example, Trinity County Life Support 301, Reach 5, PHI Med 43, and then the other TCLS units there. If you can get a patient name, that's great, and it does help, especially if you're dealing with anything involving children, to get the names before they leave the scene so that the parents know which hospital to go to. Because if you're in this type of situation, all the patients should not be going to the same hospital. And then below the name are the triage tag numbers. And again, what works best for you? It'd be nice to have the time to write down the entire tag number, but you should be at least putting the last 4, because some of these tags can overlap depending on how long you've had them and if you're using different types. The next column there is the time that the patient was taken from the scene, their ETA to the facility that you would report to the control facility, and the check mark there is if the control facility has been advised. This is the standard form. If you have a form that you use for your own operational area, just make sure that everybody in that operational area is familiar with it, and it would be helpful if you could give the LEMSA a copy of that form as well so we know what you're using. All right. Are there any questions? Because that concludes the Manual 1 presentation. Any questions at all? Anybody still there? Okay.
I just have a couple of comments, Mark.
Okay.
One, excellent job. Thank you very much. A couple of things occurred to me during your presentation. One is that this applies more to Lassen and Modoc counties, but we are working to get a MOU with Renown as a control facility. Two, I want to applaud and reinforce, you said that the BLS providers do the S.T.A.R.T triage. They are typically much better than ALS providers. The one thing about triage in the field is it's a dynamic process, and that people need to be aware that a green can progress, and to be aware of that. And just a brief comment about hemostatic agents. They were designed for the military and significant tissue loss. And if this is an active shooter, stuffing the hemostatic agents into a hole will not stop the bleeding that's going on internally from the liver or spleen, for example. And you just don't want to be lulled into a false sense of security that you have these gee whiz, gosh golly, hemostatic agents that are going to give you extra time. It's a false sense of security. Those are just some minor points, but I want to say thank you for the excellent presentation.
You're welcome. And something else that's coming down the pike for those, and it does really exclusively apply to MCIs, are the active shooter, mass violence type of incidents that are becoming more prolific. They just had another one at Fort Hood, as you're all aware. The state legislature has, I don't know if it's been approved yet or not, or been voted on or not, but EMS agencies are being strongly recommended to establish an active shooter mass violence type of policy. So you should see that coming out here pretty soon. If you want, you can, FEMA does have some guidelines out. I believe it's a 17-page document regarding active shooter mass violence. It's going to put us in a uncomfortable state because it does talk about EMS and fire responders going into a warm zone. So I would strongly encourage you to read the FEMA guidelines for mass violence active shooter, and also what's called the Hartford Consensus. It does talk a little bit about the Sandy Hook Elementary, some findings that came out after that. And also there's been some recent, I just recently heard of some more information coming out of that last LAX shooting. But that's really kind of the next level of MCI response that we're going to be looking at. Okay, and I just need to do a quick roll call. Lance Chapman?
Yes.
Hey, Lance. Jacqueline Fowler?
Yes.
Bill Galbraith?
Yes.
Devin Olio? Leela Perez?
Yes.
S. Sykes?
Yes.
And Megan Wright. Okay.
Anybody we have not touched upon?
Yes. Leroy Johnson from Willow Fire.
Okay. Anybody else?
I believe that's...
Okay. And I believe we're going to take about a 10-minute break, and then we'll start the presentation for MCI Manual 2, which is pertains to the control facility piece a little bit more. We'll leave the line open. We'll just mute it for right now, and we'll get our other presentation ready and get that up on the web. All right. So Manual 2 is the patient distribution the patient distribution manual for OAS Region 3. So once we've triaged and we've got our patients ready to go, what do we do with them? Where are we supposed to send them? Now within our region, we contact our control facility. And this is, again, a big thing. The control facility concept has been practiced in the larger cities for quite some time, and it works very well for patient distribution, especially to hospitals outside of your operational area. So some assumptions for this one are going to be the same as the previous manual. Is all responders should be trained to the ICS 100 level. ICS 200 is strongly recommended. Knowledge of the fire scope fog guide, and then basic awareness training of the MCI Region 3 plan, which we just had. And then an MCI basic operations class is strongly recommended, and that's typically just a day-long class that goes over basic MCI operations and how to build a scene. It takes the paper guide and just goes much further with it. So the purpose, as you can see there, it's intended to be an all hazards plan for distribution of patients regardless of the cause or the event. The first section addresses the day-to-day responsibilities of the control facility for patient distribution within the operational area, and subsequent sections address the roles and responsibilities of the operational area. The local EMS agency and the medical health operational area coordinator, the regional disaster medical health coordinator specialist, the RDMHS or C, and then EMSA and the National Disaster Medical System. These all fall into this part of the plan. The sections, we're going to go over control facility operations, receiving facility operations, the operational area, which includes the LEMSAs and the MOOCs. And again, that's the medical health operational area control. We'll go over the RDMHS and RDMHSC. Then we have the glossary and the appendices at the end. So, control facilities this is pre-event and things leading up to your MCI that hopefully you're not going to have. But in the event that you do, the control facilities are authorized within each operational area by the LEMSA for the purpose of coordinating patient dispersal during an MCI. For our area, there are actually 3, and we're working on more for the NorCal counties. Yuba Control covers Yuba and Sutter counties. Butte Control covers Butte, Colusa, Glenn, and Plumas counties. Shasta Control covers Shasta, Siskiyou, Tehama, and Modoc, as well as parts of Trinity and Lassen counties. We're working on an MOU with Renown Hospital in Reno for the other part of Lassen County and parts of Modoc County as well. Due to the remoteness of Sierra County, they'll be using control facilities utilized in OES Region 4, which are, I believe, Mercy, San Juan, and Tahoe Forest. Control facility operations. The important thing for the control facility is that they have the staff and resources to activate as a control facility, and that's what they are required to do under their memorandums of understanding with their LEMSAs. They also need to have some type of communication system, whether actually that would include EMS systems, which is a web-based reporting program, and I'll get into it a little bit more, but basically how that's utilized is once an MCI alert has been called, the control facility gets on EM resource and creates an MCI event that goes out to area receiving facilities, and those receiving facilities report back in a very short period of time how many patients they can take. They also need to have landline communications and two-way communications, and it's very important that operational areas establish a control facility communications plan so that when an incident happens, you know exactly what to do on the communication side. Because if you're just trying to figure that out at an incident, it takes a little bit longer and can slow things down. The control facility will also need to have a control facility supervisor and then a liaison with other local receiving facilities. Training is paramount with the control facilities, both on a full-scale exercise level and also a tabletop level, so that you're working through any issues that you have and that way it makes the real incidents go that much better. So creating an MCI event, and again, this is for the control facility. So they have received an MCI alert from the field, and those can be generated from the EMS response personnel, dispatch agencies, because remember some operational areas are dispatched by fire agencies, and they are the incident command, or they have the operational authority until somebody arrives at scene to establish the incident command. So they may decide to make this an MCI alert on their own. Local governments, other control facilities can activate other control facilities for an MCI alert. And then also the LEMSA or the MOHAWK can also create an MCI alert based on how they feel that either an incident is going, or if it's going to be something that's going to be long-term, like a pandemic event. They may activate an MCI alert so that all facilities are brought online to receive patients. So once it's determined that there's an MCI event, the control facility, what they're going to be doing is they're going to assign the appropriate staff. So they're going to have to take those folks out of the hospital and put them in, typically they have an area set aside for the control facility piece that has the communications. They create that MCI event in EM resource. I do recommend getting in touch with your LEMSA and making sure that your chief officers are at least involved in to receive the notifications in EM resource. That way, the nice thing about that is as soon as an MCI event has been created in your area, you can get a text alert, which is very nice. When those things have gone out in our areas, we get those alerts. And it's very helpful. You can start planning your resources, especially if you're a field responder. What the control facility will then do is locate the incident on a map and identify other receiving facilities that can handle the patients from that event. They maintain communications with the medical group supervisor, whether it be by radio or by landline. They just need to make sure that there's an open line of communications with the medical group supervisor or communications or the patient transportation group supervisor. Again, those positions are dependent on the size and scope of the incident. If additional receiving facilities are needed outside the operational area, the control facility may contact neighboring control facilities. For an example, something big in Glenn County is going on and they need receiving facilities in Tehama and Shasta County, then Butte Control would notify Shasta Control and set up those receiving resources. When the control facility opens up and they print out the current receiving facility worksheet, this is where they start tracking things on paper. And as facilities get back to the control facility, the receiving facilities get back to the control facilities, they start marking how many patients that they can take. Then the math really begins of how many patients that are being reported from the scene, and they start marking where they're going to be sending all those patients. The control facility does. So there's a screenshot there of, that's actually a printout from EM Resource. It shows a couple of hospitals there and what their availabilities are, and the control facility is making marks on that to show how many patients are going to be transported to those facilities. So communications, again, being paramount, the field medical communications coordinator shall be referred to by the incident name and medical. So in this scenario, it's the Sunrise incident, so they would be Sunrise Medical. The control facility should be referred to by the county name, i.e. Shasta or Butte Control. And again, this is something that may be a little bit challenging, especially on the EMS side of things, because we're not used to changing names on what we call folks. So it's really important that you take the time, maybe even write down who you're going to be talking to, and stay with that, so that you're talking with either Shasta Control or Butte Control, and that you're aware that you're going to be called whatever the incident name is in medical. So in this case, Sunrise Medical. It's the fire folks have a lot more practice with this when they're running incidents, and they may become Sunrise IC. They're used to that type of communications. On the EMS side, it can be challenging for us at times. All EMS radio traffic needing patient destinations should be routed through the control facility, and that's even non-MCI patients. And the reason for this is you never want to overload a facility. So when a control facility is notified of an MCI alert, all patient destinations should be run through the control facility. As an example, if there's an MCI in Siskiyou County, then the other counties that are supported by Shasta Control need to report their patient transports through Shasta Control. It doesn't mean that they're going to be deviated from their receiving facility. It just means that Shasta Control will now know where those patients are going. Again, for an example, if Shasta Control wants to take some of the MCI patients out of Siskiyou County and move them to receiving facilities in Shasta County, they need to know that they're not going to be overly impacting those receiving facilities in Shasta County with their normal traffic, with their normal responses. So that's why the control facility needs to be aware of all patient movement once they've been activated. Patient reports shall not be given directly to the receiving facility by the transporting units from the MCI. I talked about that earlier in Plan 1. And again, you're busy and that's a lot of radio traffic to be going on. Updating the MCI event should be done frequently, especially anytime there's new information, including changes in total patient counts. You found some patients that you didn't know were there. You've changed their triage categories, so we need to update that number, whether it's improving or increasing the immediates or decreasing the immediates, and also if there's any challenges with receiving destinations. The control facility will confirm the total number of transport resources available and begin the patient destination worksheet. Consider reassessing for the control facility side. You need to continually reassess the receiving facility capabilities. You got to remember that receiving facilities not only take in patients by air and by ground, but by POV as well. So if this is one of those incidents, say a hazmat where people have been contaminated while they've been driving, they may just continue on to the hospital and begin impacting those receiving facilities. So it's important for the control facility to continually receive updates and continually ask for updates from those receiving facilities. Okay, so for patient destinations, when the control facility is notified by the field group supervisor or their designee that the patient triage is complete, the control facility shall document the patient information on their worksheet. So what you might hear is, for example, Butte Control, this is East Avenue Medical. We have 3 immediates, 3 delayed, and 6 minors. Where would you like them to go? And then what the control facility would respond to is East Avenue Medical. We copy 3 immediates, 3 delayed, and 6 minors. What are the major injuries of your 3 immediates? How you would answer that question is Butte Control, East Avenue Medical. We have got 1 head, 1 chest, and 1 multi-system trauma. The immediate head and chest are just about ready for transport. It's going to be a while to extricate the other immediate. So that's a clear communication with the control facility about the patient condition and how quickly they need to be taken from the scene. So those are going to be the priority for the control facility as well, to get a destination for those 2 immediate patients. So for the immediate patients, the control facility is going to be looking for facility within 30 minutes or 30 miles, transport time from the incident whenever possible. Now we know in our area that can be a big challenge at times. We have several locations that our responders are greater than 30 minutes or 30 miles away from a receiving facility. Preferably the immediate trauma patients go to the nearest trauma centers when possible, following your local EMS protocol. And then immediate pediatric patients should go to pediatric centers, which again is going to be a challenge for our areas, and we're aware of that. And so are the control facilities. The delayed patients, they can go a little bit further out. They're not quite as serious, but they do need to get treatment, so they can be sent much further away. And then the minor patients can go to local emergency departments, and they can go into the front part if that's deemed necessary. But there should be an area set aside for these patients at the receiving facility. So, when more patients exist than available teams to accept these patients, consider. This is a challenge with the limited resources at some of our receiving facilities is they may not have the resources there to handle the number of patients that they will be getting. So they may need to call in additional employees to come to work and help handle that. They may need to alter their standard guidelines. And then they also may need to send patients further out than they originally expected, and that is that it will be the case in some of the larger MCIs where you're utilizing air transport, whether it be helicopter or fixed wing, to get those folks the care that they need, but you may have to ship them a little bit further to do that. Again, these are not your typical day-to-day incidents. These are the incidents that are going to challenge us and challenge the resources that we all work with on a daily basis. The key point with the control facility is just making sure you get a destination for every patient, and then you kind of have to work with them and the IC to get the resources you need to get those patients off the scene. But once all the patients have been distributed, the control facility will update the MCI event and EM resource, and that provides a final summary event that gets texted out or emailed out to all the folks that are subscribed to EM resource. After that summary goes out, the control facility will end their event and notify all participating facilities. Once it's completed, then all the paperwork really begins, and we start putting all that together. And then this is going to be part of that, as I talked about in Manual 1, that end of exercise critique. Because we need to make sure that when we do these exercises, that if we identify an issue, that we address that issue, so the next time we have one of these events, we're not going to be basically using the definition of insanity and keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting something different, but it's not going to happen. So receiving facilities, those pre-event responsibilities, on the receiving facility piece of this is you need to make sure that you have EM resource set up on a computer that everybody in the emergency room has access to, and they can hear those alerts going off, and that everybody has the appropriate approvals and permissions to get into EM resource, because again, it is a web-based resource. The facility status updates. Each receiving facility is supposed to update their status in EM resource every 24 hours, or when there's a facility status change. And that may be if your cardiologist is gone for the weekend and you don't have cardiology coverage, that should be put in EM resource for every facility to see. EM resource automatically prompts each receiving facility to update their status every day anyways. So if everything's good, you just need to acknowledge that everything is good, and that's good. You're good for another 24 hours. So once an MCI alert has been initiated by the control facility, those individual receiving facilities need to determine their capacity and capability. They need to verify whether or not they have a surgeon availability for the immediate trauma patients. They need to enter their capacity in EM resource for immediate delayed and minor patients within 5 minutes of the request. So it's a very tight, quick turnaround for those receiving facilities. And it's again because this is information the control facility needs to know so that they can relay it to those folks in the field about where their patients are going to be going. The receiving facilities need to monitor for updates, and then as they receive patients, they're going to the only information that the receiving facilities are going to have regarding incoming patients should be coming from the control facility, because remember, the inbound units aren't going to be given reports. So the control facility will advise them that they're coming in with a they should be given the age, the gender, and then the very simple injury ID, which is going to be a 47-year-old male 47-year-old male head injury. That's what the receiving facility will know, and then an ETA of the ground ambulance or the air resource that's coming in. And then to receive those patients, they just need to make sure that they have their teams available as these patients come in. Hospital admitting personnel should be using the triage tag number for admitting process, which means that the patient information and medical records may be retrieved rapidly by using that triage tag number. So what we would really like to see is once that triage tag is placed on the patient at scene, that number sticks with them through their care at the receiving facility. Now, we know that the hospitals or the receiving facilities are going to want to add their own number to it, but if we can maintain that triage number, it's very helpful if we have to do follow-up with those patients, or even law enforcement follow-up, so that they can easily find those patients at the receiving facilities. Now, another part of this, as far as training for the receiving facilities, is called a have bed pull. And it's Hospital Available Beds in Emergencies and Disasters. And then the acronym, we call that the HAVBED. And this is a standardized real-time hospital bed and resource availability pool that's put out. And usually they're generated by a control facility, the MOAC, or the LEMSA. And basically what it is they put it out to the facilities and they want to know what the hospital status is at that particular time. And they have 30 minutes to respond, and it's kind of really a tabletop drill for MCIs. It just gets the hospitals on board with going through their standard practice for finding out their bed availability, but it gives them a little bit more time to do that so that they can be successful in doing it. But it is important that every hospital participates in the HAVBED polls in the region. So the EMS agency will be notified by the local control facility for any events that require hospital evacuation, the crisis standards of care protocols, the inability of the control facility to conduct a distribution activity, or other criteria established by the EMS agency or the MOAC. And again, these are general guidelines. They can be more specific depending on the facility or the operational area. Any EMS agency or MOAC may be activated by the RDMHS for receiving patients in the event outside the mutual aid region. So basically, if patients are going to be transported outside of your operational area or mutual aid region, the RDMHS can help the control facilities facilitate the movement of those patients. And for the field responders, this is stuff that happens that you don't see. This is all being handled at the control facility and LEMSA level. But for the folks at the hospital, these are conversations that will be in place for those very large incidents. For example, the Calusa bus crash, where folks went outside of the operational area, and they also went outside of the regional area. They went into OES Region 4 because some were transported to UC Davis and I believe Mercy San Juan as well, or Sutter, one of the Sutter facilities. Sorry about that. For local events that expect to exceed the capabilities, we really kind of need to get into the habit of notifying the EMS agency and the MOAC so they can help facilitate the movement of patients from out of the area. These sites are a little bit busy, and I apologize for that, but there's a lot of information that does go out during these events. And again, it's for the larger ones that are occurring outside the area. We may need to set up field treatment sites, patient reception areas, or I guess in the field we would call these casualty collection points, where we're bringing patients to an area where the hospitals are overloaded, so we actually begin treatment usually in coordination with public health in the field. I'm not going to get into reading this whole thing because there's a lot of information in here, but for the control facility folks, know that and for the receiving facilities, that you really need to make sure that you're communicating your hospital status through the control facility or to the MOAC, so additional resources can be established and be opened up for you to help with the patient overload that you're experiencing. Okay, you've heard me talk about the RDMHS or the RDMHC. This is a Regional Disaster Medical Health Coordinator or Specialist. In OES Region 3, we have a specialist, and they are responsible for coordination of medical and health mutual aid among the operational areas within the mutual aid region. So that's a point of contact for all 13 counties within Region 3 to take care of issues if we need to move patients outside of the operational area. It is a 24-hour person or a position, so even if that person who is assigned to that has someone on call for them if they're not available. And they work directly with IMSA and also OES. So, are you ready for this type of an accident? And you know, this one it has the strong potential to be an MCI, or it has the potential to be nothing. So I would imagine the dispatch for the incident that would come out here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, probably 6 vehicles involved. And this may be something that an MCI alert is called for. Now, when you arrive there, you notice that everybody's out of the vehicle and you may only have 1 or 2 patients. So this is something that you would cancel the MCI alert on. But if there was injuries in all of these vehicles, there's a strong chance that you would just maintain this as an MCI alert. Well, how about this? A little bit more. Through several of the counties in Region 3, we do have passenger trains that roll through, and they have been known to derail. They may strike a vehicle and derail, creating a mass casualty incident. Again, if you hear a possibility of a passenger train derailment, you'd want to start off calling an MCI alert right off the bat. One thing I do like here is you do see some people that are vested up, and it looks like they're trying to do the rapid extrication from the scene and get these folks into treatment areas. And then here's pretty much our worst nightmare, is when you see a couple of school buses. This picture is kind of interesting because there is a, besides the two buses and the semi, if you look very closely underneath that bus on the left, there's a car crumpled up in there. So, you know, you have the potential for 60 plus patients in this accident, plus some real potentially some real critical ones. So we're rolling through this one a little bit faster. There are some forms. The receiving facility capacity worksheet. And again, these don't necessarily pertain to folks in the field, but then the patient destination worksheet, and then the MCI critiques. And the critiques are what we really do when we pull together at the end of an exercise or at the end of an incident to really review what's been done and what we can do better, so next time those challenges don't present themselves. Okay, so Appendix D is the regional map, and that's a tentative map at this time. It's mostly done. Like I had mentioned earlier, we just recently got the memorandums of understanding in place with Mercy Medical Center Reading and Inlow Medical Center Chico to handle the control facility piece for the NorCal counties in those areas. And you can see they're grayed out. The three counties in the middle that have the horizontal and vertical lines in them, Shasta, Siskiyou, and Tehama, are operated, they're managed by Shasta Control, as well as Trinity and Modoc. And then if you look down there on the blue counties, Butte Control handles Butte, Plumas, Colusa, and Glenn. And Sutter and Yuba, which are part of OES Region 3, are handled by Yuba Control. And Lassen and Sierra had a little bit of trouble divvying up Lassen there, but the western part of Lassen County is handled by Shasta Control, and we're working on that MOU with Renown Hospital for the eastern part of Lassen County and the southeastern part of Modoc County. And then Sierra County, just due to their rural nature, they're going to actually be handled by two separate control facilities in Region 4. And it's mainly because of the way that the roads really kind of drop out into the two towns there where those facilities are located. So that's kind of the down and dirty on the control facility manual 2. And I'll open it up for questions. Willows Fire, any questions?
No, we have no questions. Just when we get through this, before we get off the line, I have to add one more person to your roster.
Okay.
Well, I want to take this opportunity to thank Mark again for an excellent presentation. There's one thing that may happen when you're talking about hazmat in particular. The local facilities need to be aware that they may be getting patients, minor patients, way before criticals in a hazmat episode, because many people will, quote, self-triage themselves away from the scene and drive directly to emergency departments. And that can overwhelm an emergency department, and so it may be incumbent upon EMS to help set up an alternative care site or field treatment site to take care of these minor patients, so the local facility is able to handle the criticals. This has happened in multiple different MCIs, and there's just no way of controlling it. It just is one of those things that happen.
Very good point. And moving forward, you know, we have these plans out there, so really kind of what do we do with them now? Do we wait till the big one happens and then dust them off and pull them out? Please don't let that happen in your areas. Start having those conversations with your responders. You know, if you're fire-based, start talking with the ambulance providers. If you're the ambulance provider, start talking with fire and law. Start having those conversations now about how these incidents are going to be ran. And you don't have to answer every question, but the big questions of whether or not this is going to be a unified command incident. Establish those lines of communications with the control facilities that when you do call an MCI alert, your dispatch center isn't going, what do we do? Have those protocols in place so that when you do call an MCI alert, the proper notifications are made, the lines of communications are established rapidly, and it really preps you to succeed in these types of incidents, which is paramount. And I mean, we've all had our MCIs, and we all know what could have gone better, which is usually communications is the first one. So take that time on the upfront piece to establish that line of communication. Start having some tabletop drills. And when you do drill this, take the time to go through it. If things aren't working out in your drill and you're not able, you're not activating things the way you think you should, just stop for a moment, hit the pause button, get it all figured out, make those activations, and walk through it. That's really what a drill is for, is to learn. So we should be taking that time to making sure we're checking off all those boxes when we go through the drills, when we walk through. That way, when you do get involved in that real incident, it's more of a second nature thing than anything, and you're not dusting off that policy to go, or the plan to go, well, what were we supposed to do next? It should flow. So that's kind of my 2 cents worth on what to do with these plans now.
Thank you very much, Mark.
You're welcome. And Lance, you had somebody else you wanted to throw in there?
Yeah, we need to add Andrew Pentecost.
Spell the last name for me.
Last name Pentecost.
Okay. All right, and Patty is going to be emailing out the tests. So if you can just complete those tests and either fax them or scan them back to her, and we'll take care of the CEs.
Willows, if you can put them together and mail them to me.
Or if for the Willows folks, if you just want to put them together and mail them, that works too. And we'll get your CEs out to you.